So let's talk about the Indian Constitution. It's this incredible document, right? It makes some of the most ambitious promises you'll find anywhere. But, and this is the really interesting part, not all of those promises are legally binding. You can't always take them to court. So, why is that? Let's get into it. Yeah, it really gets you thinking, doesn't it? When a constitution promises you something, shouldn't you be able to demand it? I mean, can you actually take the government to court and say, hey, you promised this? Well, in India, the answer is, it depends. And figuring out what it depends on is exactly what we're going to do today. All right, so to really get our heads around this, we need to go back to the beginning. Imagine the framers of the Constitution. They had this massive task, right? And they ended up weaving two very different kinds of promises into the very fabric of the new nation. It's like they had this dual vision for what India could be. So on one hand, you have promise number one, the fundamental rights. These are probably the ones you've heard of. Freedom of speech, the right to equality, the right to life. Think of them as your personal shield. They're there to protect you, the individual, from the power of the state. They're basically the foundation of India's political democracy. But then, on the other hand, you have promise number two, the directive principles. Now, these are different. They're not about individual shields. They're more like a grand blueprint or a to-do list for the entire country. They lay out this incredible vision for a fair and just society, a welfare state that takes care of people's social and economic needs. So you've got political freedom and social welfare. Sounds great, right? Like the perfect combo. But here's the catch. The way these two promises were set up, well, it put them on a collision course. It created this built-in tension that would lead to some major constitutional battles for years and years. Okay, this table really lays it all out. Just look at that first line. Justiciability. That's a fancy word, but it's the key to everything. Fundamental rights? Yep, they're enforceable. If someone violates your right, you can march right into court. But directive principles? No, not enforceable. Think of them more like guiding stars or a mission statement for the government, not a legal contract. And that one single difference, that's where all the drama comes from. So let's break that down. Non-justiciable. What does it actually mean? Well, it means you, as a citizen, can't sue the government because you don't have a job, even if the right to an adequate livelihood is a goal in the principles. See what I mean? It's a moral compass for politicians, a political guideline, but it's not a legal command that a judge can order them to follow. Which leads to the obvious question, why? Why make these huge promises if you can't back them up in court? Well, the framers were dreamers for sure, but they were also realists. They knew that a brand new India just didn't have the money to guarantee everything for everyone from day one. Plus, with a country as incredibly diverse as India, a single rigid rule for everything just wasn't going to work. So they put their trust in the people, in democracy. The idea was that elections and public opinion would be the real enforcers. So, you can see the problem, right? This set up a huge dilemma. What happens when the government tries to do something for the greater good, following one of those directive principles, but in doing so, it tramples on an individual's fundamental right? Who wins? Well, this is where the Indian judiciary comes in, and they didn't just act like a referee blowing a whistle. They acted more like an architect, trying to build a bridge between these two powerful ideas. And you can really see how their thinking changed over time. Back in the 50s, the courts were pretty clear. Fundamental rights were king. If a law aimed at social good clashed with the right always won. End of story. But fast forward to the 1980s, and something really interesting happens. In a huge case called Minerva Mills, the Supreme Court completely changed its tune. They said, wait a minute, these two things aren't enemies. They're actually complementary. They're two sides of the same coin. And they came up with this brilliant metaphor to explain it. They said fundamental rights and directive principles are like the two wheels of a chariot. A chariot can't move forward if one wheel is bigger or more important than the other. You need both working together in perfect balance for the nation to progress. This idea is called harmonious construction, and honestly, it changed the whole game. Now, this wasn't just some dusty legal theory. This was a revolution. It had huge real-world impacts. Because by focusing on harmony, the courts found a creative way to turn some of those aspirational goals we talked about into actual legally protected rights that people could demand. Let me give you the perfect example. Education. Originally, Article 45 was a directive principle. It was a beautiful idea that said the state should endeavor to provide free and compulsory education. See that word? Endeavor? Try. For decades, that's all it was. A nice goal. You couldn't force the government to do it. But then, the Supreme Court did something incredible. They took a look at the fundamental right to life and asked a really deep question. What does life even mean here? Is it just about breathing, or is it about living a life with dignity? And their answer was that you can't have a life of dignity if you don't have an education. This was a complete game changer. And here's the magic trick. By linking that aspirational goal of education to the enforceable right to life, the Supreme Court basically gave it teeth. This judicial move created so much momentum that Parliament actually amended the Constitution. And just like that, Article 21A was created, turning the goal of education into a legally guaranteed fundamental right for every child. And this wasn't just a one-time thing. The courts used this same logic again and again. They read the right to life to include the right to a clean environment, pulling from one directive principle. They used it to support the right to a livelihood and even equal pay for equal work, connecting other principles to other rights. That bridge between goals and rights, it was now solid. Okay, so we've got rights for the individual and we've got goals for the state. But something was still missing. Because a healthy democracy isn't just about what you can get, it's also about what you give back. It's about your responsibility to society. And that's when the final piece of this puzzle was put into place. Yep, in 1976, they added something called fundamental duties. Now, just like the directive principles, you can't be taken to court for not following them. But they serve a really important purpose. They're a moral reminder that for every right you enjoy, you also have a duty to your community and your country. It's that idea that rights and responsibilities go hand in hand. Now, this whole balancing act between rights, goals, and duties, it's not some dusty old chapter in a history book. It's a live wire. It's a debate that's happening right now. And there is no better example of this ongoing tension than the debate over something called the Uniform Civil Code. Okay, so the Uniform Civil Code is one of those directive principles, a goal for the country to have one set of personal laws for everyone: marriage, divorce, inheritance, that kind of thing. People who support it say it's essential for national unity and gender justice. But people who oppose it say, hold on, that would violate our fundamental right to religious freedom and trample on our diverse cultures. You see it, right? It's a classic showdown, a community goal slamming right into an individual right. And that leaves us with the big, essential question that's always at the heart of the Indian Constitution. In this constant dance of democracy, who should take the lead? The individual with their guaranteed personal rights, or the community with its shared collective goals? There's no easy answer in the text, and maybe that's the point. The Constitution doesn't give us the answer, it gives us the challenge for every generation to keep debating, keep pushing, and keep trying to find that perfect, delicate balance.